A Giants podcast for Giants fans
by Giants fans.
It's Shaun Morash.
On the sideline, into the end zone. Touchdown, Giants!
From the offseason to the wins and the losses, it's time to take one Giant step.
Welcome inside One Giant Step. It's Combine Week. I'm Shaun Morash. He's Bryce Gelman. Thank you, as always, for tuning into One Giant Step. Of course, available free on the Audacy App, everywhere you get your podcasts available. Bryce is ready to head off on a little trip to England.
Yeah,
I'm a couple weeks away from a vacation as well, although the weather getting a little nicer where we are in the tri-state area. Bryce, you ever been to England before we get into Combine Week?
I've only been to Europe once, and it was Barcelona. So I'm going to London, and then on the weekend me and my sister, we're gonna go to Lisbon, Portugal.
Nice.
So,
Nice. That's a good trip.
Need it. Yeah.
That's a good trip. So good for you. Hope you have fun. So when Bryce returns next week, we will obviously pump out another episode of One Giant Step. And let's see, based on conversations that happened at the Combine, as we were lucky enough to see on Hard Knocks last year, that's where potential trade talks can begin and can continue to start. Giants obviously chatted up with the Panthers last year. They tried to make a move with the Patriots. So we'll see what Joe Schoen has in store at the Combine. And for me, before we get to Joe Schoen, who spoke on Tuesday morning, Bryce, just kind of overarching what we should be looking at as Giant fans with the Combine theme. Okay. Shedeur Sanders is basically not going to do anything but talk to teams at the Combine. Abdul Carter, albeit he did get banged up in the college football playoff, not going to do much of anything at the Combine but speak to teams. I haven't heard at this moment about Cam Ward yet, Travis Hunter as well. But look, this is my pre-warning to all of you, because I was guilty of this a couple of years ago. And with the Giants right at the top of the draft, we need to be reminded of something. The biggest prospects, the more and more the Combine happens every year, the biggest ones that probably feel they're going top 10, top 5 in the draft, most of them tend to not do a bunch of activities and wait for their pro day. They go, they talk to teams. So save yourself from the comments of, oh, this guy wasn't up for the competition. I would stay away from this guy. What does he mean he's not going to throw at the Combine? What does it mean? Abdul Carter's not going to run the 40? Don't get caught up in that stuff. These guys are still, the majority of what you're looking at for a player exists in the tape they've already put in college football.
Exactly. It can only hurt them. It can only hurt them at that point.
It can only hurt them.
Yeah.
And the only, and there's very rare a guy takes off at the Combine and it ends up being beneficial for their career and the team's career. Last year, that would have been Xavier Worthy, and obviously the Chiefs hit a home run there, trading up. He broke all kinds of 40 records. But outside of that, usually the guy who runs the fastest 40, go back at those lists, don't end up being great NFL players. So I'm not trying to pour cold water on the Combine, because look, when you're sitting there on a Saturday morning, Sunday morning, Friday, you're home from work and you want to watch any of the events, bless your heart. And you can get to know a lot about guys, I think, that will go beyond the first round, which is really critical for what the Giants have upcoming. But overall, Bryce, are you with me? Let's not panic if any of the guys you want at the third overall pick aren't exactly doing a lot at the Combine.
Yeah. Again, as I said, they only have things to lose. Like, they've already proven their value and worth at this point. If they're being mocked in the top 5, what's the point of going out there in the Combine? Like, there's nothing left to prove that they can't prove at their own pro day, where 25, 30 teams potentially could be there to watch them, in their own environment, in a comfortable environment for them.
And I know I keep mentioning Hard Knocks, which is funny because we're going to get to a Joe Schoen answer on that in just a couple of minutes. But I actually thought the Combine episode last year on the Hard Knocks, in hindsight, now that we're getting to it again, is really insightful on what to look for. So while Shedeur Sanders and we know Abdul Carter aren't going to do much but talk to teams, the talking to teams part in the interview process is actually really freaking important, and probably more important than anything they're going to do physically on a football field. Like you said, it could hurt them if they failed something physically. They've put a ton of college football games on tape. That is more important than what you're doing in your shorts. So it's still an important week, and the juicy stuff is stuff we won't get to see, which is, how they react to interviews. Brian Dable sitting there asking a guy to, write a play down. We're not going to get any of that this year, but that's the important stuff. So Bryce, obviously you're going to be in England. You're going to be the furthest thing away from watching Combine events. I don't blame you. I can't say I won't, but I won't be locked in. A couple of years ago when I was working for the DA show, CBS Sports Radio, I used to really take pride in watching the Combine events, come in Monday all prepared. Look, if it's on, it's on. I got college basketball, hockey, the NBA, all that stuff to watch. So God bless you if you're watching the Combine this week. there will be moments, I'm sure, clipped on the internet that will make me tune in. Now, I'm not telling you not to watch, Giant fans, those One Giant Step listeners. We just talked about those top guys at the top of the draft. And I feel like I'm an idiot for repeating this, Bryce, but it bears repeating, I guess, because it's not sexy. Whenever we talk about the quarterback position and the Giants addressing quarterback and what they should do at the top of the draft, it's immediately hit with, okay, but how does that really make you better? Are you going to be that much better next year with so-and-so? And it frustrates me so much because it's like you forget, or people for some reason forget, there's a whole rest of the draft the Giants are going to be picking guys. Okay? Last year that got them, a Newbin, a Phillips, a Theo Johnson, a Tyrone Tracy. Past years have not been fruitful, and we've talked about that. But there's a whole draft beyond the first pick, and those are the guys that I think you can learn a little bit about in the combine. We don't know who they are yet, but I would just give you a couple positions to watch out for, Bryce. And the Giants probably are in a spot where they should be going best player available regardless in each round. But think about positions like cornerback. I mean, this team is lacking a number one corner. Positions like safety still. I mean, we don't know what the future holds with Jason Pinnock. Who's playing next to Newbin? What are they doing? Dane Belton's still around. Defensive tackle, an enormous position that has been talked about at length next to Dexter Lawrence. The Giants might need to add two of those guys via draft. And this seems like D-tackle-wise, like the deepest D-tackle draft the Giants have, or the NFL has had in quite some time. That's an important position. Wide receiver still. I mean, they're going to need an outside guy if they don't sign a Darius Slayton. Is that something that comes from a round 2, 3, 4 kind of pick? So while the quarterback stuff is sexy, and maybe you'll fall in love with a Kyle McCord, Bryce's guy from Syracuse or something like that at the combine, just remember those other positions where the Giants need, they need depth, they need to develop. You may want to, try to switch your brain off like Severance, which I'm very locked into as a show, and kind of focus on everything but quarterback this weekend, Bryce.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Shador, not a part of the combine. We don't know what's going to happen with Cam Ward. Maybe he follows the same plan as Shador, but it's the other positions. And it's not just watching like guys the Giants could potentially take, because here's the thing with these guys who are projected early second round, mid second round, this is their chance to play themselves into the first round. You're almost looking at the guys who everyone thought were going to be first round guys who kind of slip into the second round, and the guys that go ahead of them, they're going to be at the end of the first round. I doubt the Giants are going to want to trade up for anything other than a quarterback into the end of the first round. Let's say they take Abdul Carter at 3 or whoever. So I mean, listen, it's like if you want to be locked in, lock into it. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of Giants content creators who put stuff out about the guys they like, and they're going to, disseminate the information better than you potentially watching hours of combine footage. Like, it's kind of boring. I get it. It's repetitive. But there definitely is a lot to learn from those guys who are projected into the first round and the second round, because those are the guys who either play themselves back or play themselves forward. And for the Giants at the start of each round, that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely is. Now, let's get to Joe Schoen's comments. He was amazingly of 32 general managers that are speaking between Tuesday and Wednesday. First up, the first general manager in the NFL to get to speak 10 a.m. Tuesday was Joe Schoen. I got a little alert 9 in the morning. Hey, be prepared. Joe Schoen speaking at 10 a.m. Whoa, I was almost ready for Wednesday, Bryce, for that to be the case. And that led to me and you texting about what time to tape this podcast. Yeah. So there's a couple things. We're not going to go too crazy, but the bulk of the rest of this podcast, this episode will be made up of kind of trying to parse through what Joe Schoen said. So here's my first opening reminder. For the second time in this episode, I'm going to mention last year's Hard Knocks. Do you remember Joe Schoen's press conference that was featured on last year's Hard Knocks?
Yeah, Bryce, with the whole PR training before.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So remember last year, or I guess over the summer when we saw this, Joe Schoen has a meeting before he goes out to meet the media at the Combine with one of the heads of PR for the Giants. And that person, I forgot his name. Damn it, he's really good at his job too. He helps out here at WFAN. I don't even want to guess. But anyway, he did a good job of basically saying this is what people are writing about. This is what people are talking about on talk radio. This is what you're going to be asked about. And while we didn't get everything, Joe Schoen was basically prepped for any possible question that's going to come his way, and they practiced how he would answer it. And it was fascinating because the big takeaway we had, if you remember that episode of Hard Knocks, Bryce, was, we just get fed shovels of elephant crap by the general managers, and they're totally prepared, and this is what happens. However, he did speak. Keep that in the back of your mind that he probably, and he definitely had that same kind of meeting and was prepared for several questions. So, Bryce, I'll give you my first takeaway of this whole thing. Directly asked about Matt Stafford, and he has the Matt Stafford's under contract with another team. He said you're going to have to go speak to the Rams general manager about that, which you have to say, which is clearly a rehearsed line, because anything other than that, even despite the report, remember the Rams haven't issued this. Tom Pelissero reported that the Rams have given him permission to seek a trade. Joe Schoen legally cannot say he's engaged with the Rams on trade talks. So don't overreact the other way. Now, that's just an answer. They may have zero conversation. They may have some. I think there's smoke and they are having some, but he has to give that answer. So you would agree? You know, don't read anything positive or negative.
There's nothing that was going to come of that.
Okay. He went quarterback heavy, though, overall, as you would expect, right? The Giants only have Tommy DeVito basically on a roster heading into camp right now. So they don't have to protect the feelings of Daniel Jones, which they didn't do last year anyway. Remember, they basically just backed them over with a truck. Yeah. It is a free-for-all at the quarterback position, and Joe Schoen and the Giants are not idiots. He was going to get questions about it. So just to kind of summarize everything, and we'll kind of bring up what the points are without playing back the clips, Joe Schoen absolutely, and this should come to the surprise of nobody, wants and acknowledges the team needs a veteran quarterback to come in here, not only to teach a potential rookie, but to, quote, win games in 2025, which is important because we obviously know the owner wants things, kind of calm down and calm the waters, which brings us to plenty of the Matt Stafford conversation. Joe Schoen also didn't shy away from the fact, whether this hurts leverage or not, while trading back and getting more picks is always nice, they are very, very interested in trading up, which would tell you they probably do like a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward if they're willing to have those conversations. So both of those things were basically acknowledged, Bryce. There was some other stuff, Saquon, who cares, Andrew Thomas, more on that in a second, but mainly quarterback-wise. My takeaway, Bryce, before you give yours, I think Matt Stafford is at the top of their list. I think he absolutely, and we've talked about this, gives them the best chance to win games in 2025. I also don't think that prohibits them from taking the quarterback they like at 3. It would probably prohibit them from trading up. Similar to what the Falcons did last year, though, much higher up. Even if they pay Matt Stafford, I think Joe Schoen's biggest priority this offseason is throwing darts at the quarterback position at every which way while trying to also win games in 2025. Now, many may argue that's dangerous, and I totally understand that. I'm not anti getting a rookie and getting Matt Stafford because, to me, I'm having my cake and eat it too. I want as many opportunities to make sure I don't fail winning games at the quarterback position as possible. But, man, I think they're going to be in on this Stafford race. Now, does it get to be a price point that's too high, whether it's contract extension or whether that's draft capital? Potentially there is, and maybe there is a walkaway moment. But, yeah, man, I think they're in on it. And I would say this. My capping point is if they do not get Matt Stafford, the Raiders get him. The Jets get him, even though that won't happen financially. Just pick a team that makes the trade that's interested in a quarterback. Maybe it's the Browns, maybe it's the Titans. Who knows? Whatever the hell Matt Stafford figures out to deal with, and it's not the Giants. I do think the Giants then will be ultra aggressive and ironically give up more than they should to go up to 1 or 2 if they can and make that pick. So just be very cautious if you're not willing to give up a 3rd rounder or something like that for Stafford to pay him on what the other end result is. Because I think if they don't get him, man, it's going to be full steam ahead to make sure they get one of the top 2 quarterbacks at the draft.
I'm all out on Stafford. I don't want to start a debate here. I'm all out. I'm like,
okay, no, that's fine. What do you got? Why are you all out?
100% out on him. I kind of brought this up during my solo episode last week. I talked about a few different guys that I wanted the Giants to go after. If you missed that, check it out wherever you get your podcast. Man, I just don't see how it's worth giving up draft assets plus using whatever they have, the remaining cap room that they have, to sign Matthew Stafford. He wants $50 million a year, Shaun. Does that make any sense to be a mediocre team throughout the next 2 to 3 years, the twilight of his career? I am so out on being a mediocre team. You could be a mediocre team by filling other holes and drafting a rookie quarterback. We have said repeatedly on this podcast, and listen, this is nothing to do with the fact the Giants have an impossible schedule next year, but how many times have we said on this podcast that they finally built correctly? They finally built in the trenches. We see a bolstered defensive line. We saw a competent offensive line throughout the first 6 games of the season before Andrew Thomas got hurt. This team is built correctly with a quarterback who is competent. Doesn't have to be Matthew Stafford. You could still win 6 or 7 games. You get Matthew Stafford, you give up draft assets to get him, plus you pay him the remaining money that you have in free agency to sign other guys. You are going to sit at 7 to 8 wins. You're not going to make the playoffs 3 years in a row. And we are going to see a firing of the general manager and the head coach anyway, because they weren't able to break through and make the playoffs. I cannot sit through another 2 to 3 mediocre seasons. I understand you want to see them in the playoffs. You want hope. You want to hang on to whatever there is within you that believes the Giants could be a good franchise going forward. You get Matthew Stafford, you give up any assets. You think they trade a 3rd-round pick? That is technically, my dog is flipping out over my take. But I just do not see how that is the best possible option. If they don't get him, they trade up. Listen, I'm against the trade up as well. But if that's the option, otherwise, then fine, do it. I can't do it. I cannot foresee a circumstance in which they trade for Stafford and this ends up being a good situation for the Giants 3 to 4 years down the line. I can't.
Okay. I think your fears are totally warranted, Bryce, and justified, and I think you represent a lot of Giant fans with that mindset. However, I do think that there needs to be some clarity on something. The Rams have given Matt Stafford permission to seek, a potential contract extension trade partner elsewhere. I'm not telling you nobody will, but the idea that he wants $50 million a year, are we new to negotiating? Okay, he wants that, which means he's not going to get that.
Well, if he gets 40 and the Giants have $10 million left, doesn't matter. It's like apples and oranges.
Hold on. Joe Schoen was asked about the void year stuff and how the Eagles skirt the cap, and he said if the right player is, worth it, they will do that on a player-by-player basis. That was part of the press conference. Code for the Giants are not going to have some $45 million cap hit for Matt Stafford this year with their cap flexibility if they do it. And furthermore, if you do get a quarterback like that, where maybe it's, 2 years and some void years beyond that with this extension, remember this, Bryce. Remember this, because Giants fans are losing sight of this. Whether you like it or not, one of the higher-end veteran quarterbacks is going to be a New York Giant in 2025. They are not going to have Jameis Winston making $2.5 million and call it a day. So whether that is Russell Wilson, whether that is Kirk Cousins, whether that's Aaron freaking Rodgers, the Giants are likely, even if it's on a 1-year deal, to have a quarterback making $32 million a year anyway. And the difference between Stafford and an extension and void years is then you may have to pay more upfront, eating up more of the salary cap by paying one of those 3 guys, Bryce.
The difference is you're trading draft assets to get Stafford. With these other guys, they're free agents. You don't have to give up anything to get them besides money. Whereas
Bryce,
Stafford, you have to give up both.
They're not giving up the 1st or 2nd round pick. So if they give up the 3rd round pick for him, that's the Matt Ryan deal. Okay.
They got Drew Phillips last year in the 3rd round.
Okay. You're right. And I love Drew Phillips. They have done diddly squat in the 3rd round. And most teams, 3rd rounds are crapshoots. And if I could either have, let's just say, what would I rather have? The next Jalen Hyatt and Russell Wilson taking up more singular space on a salary cap this year, or Matt Stafford taking up less of a salary cap this year, but give up that 3rd round pick, that's where I'd rather have Stafford. So I think, you're right, $50 million a year sucks. Giving up draft capital sucks. Getting the best possible guy. And this is where else you lose me, Bryce. When you bring up next year's schedule, and it's something when the eventual schedule comes out, well, hem and haw, and you're right, the opponents on paper are really difficult. By the way, the Giants should be underdogs in every game based on the roster. We'll see what else they do. Oh, I get it. The way to close that gap and not count everything as a loss, the only quarterback they possibly could add this offseason where you feel confident, hey, I can match wits here is Matt Stafford. He's still a top 10 quarterback in the NFL.
But on the short term, he's not going to help you have any success in 2 to 3 years when the Giants need to be good. We're talking
that
about
is
right
why,
now.
but that is why I would still
next season.
That's why I would take
the Giants are SOL for next season, right?
But that is
we
why
both agree the Giants have no chance to do anything next season, no matter what they do. Unless they got unless Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward turns out to be a generational quarterback.
I think they could win 9 games with Matt Stafford next year. And whatever else they do.
I do not think with the current roster they have.
But it's not the current roster. This is my point.
I'm just saying.
It's not the current roster.
I just
don't see cap space beyond Stafford and other
upside to signing Matt Stafford to a 2-year $90 million deal. I don't get that.
Okay, so you would rather the team purposely try to win 4 games again?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you could go out and get a guy who's a step below him in free agency. Listen,
you're not listening to me. That guy is going to cost you more cap space this year than Matt Stafford is based on the extension.
Fine, but then in 2 years, when you need the cap space, then Stafford's cap hit is higher than whoever you sign this year. So
no, not with the void years. You're not understanding how the Eagles do things. This is what Shane said. Okay, this is what I'm trying to walk you through. Everybody acts like, oh, Stafford's not going to get $50 million. Okay, he's going to get maybe 40. The other guy that you're looking at is going to get 28, 30, and probably more of an upfront charge, which prohibits you from doing more this year to make the team better.
This year, that's
important.
Next year,
and you can still use your first-round pick if Warder Sanders is there and take him and do exactly what the Falcons did. And oh, by the way, yeah, Cousins didn't work out. You hope that, like Jordan Love or Patrick Mahomes, that quarterback never has to see the field this year. And then this team could get a freaking feel, and you can actually develop Wan'Dale Robinson, Malik Neighbors on winning football games. So I understand, Bryce. I'm not even calling you an idiot because you actually probably have the pulse of the majority of people what they're going through and thinking with the Stafford thing. I'm not giving up the first-round pick, 3rd overall. I'm not giving up the second-round pick. If it's 3rd or beyond, I'm not worried about that draft pick asset to make the team better with this quarterback position. And if it's an extension that's better health-wise for the Giants and the salary cap, which, by the way, is going to continue to go up these next couple of years as well. The shorter-term deal with a high end
it's going up for everyone else too. It's not just you know what I mean? Like everyone gets more money.
I know. So, but still, that's how you operate. That's still a benefit. I'd rather not pay Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins $35 million on the cap this year.
I talked about this. I talked about this last week. Do you really think a team is going to pay Russell Wilson more than $20 million a year?
Look,
I cannot see it
happening. Crazy, but the desperation of the quarterback position, I don't know, man. I don't know. And by the way, we could look back at this podcast and laugh in a couple of weeks when free agency hits, no doubt about it, and then we'll have more conversations about it. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where I'm at. But either way, look. You're going to go to England. We could come back from England, and the Giants may have already orchestrated a trade.
Yeah.
In which case, we figure that out. But beyond that, man, it's going to be obviously a highly debated offseason with the Giants. The good news is, unlike Major League Baseball, we're going to know what the hell is going on. Like a month from now, the Giants are going to have a veteran quarterback. This isn't going to keep going on.
Yeah.
So by the time we hit March 25th, we're going to know what is up. So this is going to happen quick. That's the way football works, which is a good thing. And which is why you're going to want to download and subscribe to One Giant Step everywhere podcasts are available, because the moment news happens, we want to be here for you. Now, the interesting part about this, though, is Bryce is in England this weekend, so if a trade breaks, he's got the keys to the castle. We'll figure that out.
I'm bringing the computer. computer. You want to do a solo episode? I'll produce it. I'll take the time out of my day.
Oh, dude, the only thing I'll say is if on Saturday they trade for Stafford, we may need to figure it out. That's all I'm saying.
In Lisbon, I'm gonna be touring a castle. I'm gonna get the notification. I gotta run back to the hotel.
We'll figure it. No, I'm not going to stop your tourism. I got to wake up in the middle of the night. We'll figure it out. Or when I'm away, who knows if they strike a deal, but I tried to do it a little after free agency. We'll see. Either way, interesting stuff coming. Download, subscribe, One Giant Step. Anywhere you're listening to this right now, why not just subscribe to it so you know when the news happens over the next couple of weeks where to find Bryce and myself. At Bryce Gelman on Twitter. At Shaun Morash on Twitter. And, of course, you can continue to catch me with Evan and Tiki weekdays, 2 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Eastern on WFAN, also available free on the Audacy app. Thank you, everybody. It's Combine Weekend. Enjoy the workouts. And thanks for taking One Giant Step with us.